Welcome to Again But Better, a new podcast brought to you by the Florida State University Percussion Studio. My name is John Parks, and I'll be your host.
I'm Darcy Wright, Associate Producer.
And I'm Austin Palella, Project Coordinator.
We hope to enhance and inspire your approach to music performance and pedagogy through our experiences at Florida State. So let's get into it. Today's episode is the first in a series on ensemble rehearsal strategies and techniques, which we're calling the 3 E's: expectation, engagement, and efficiency. Enjoy! I'm so excited that you guys are here. As you know, the reason that we're doing this is because once we played at PASIC in November, we got tons and tons of emails and messages that were super supportive, but almost all of them ended with something like, how do you get them to play that way? What's your rehearsal like? How do you structure all these kinds of things? And of course, I love talking about these things, but I didn't really have time to type it all out to, answer everybody. So I've been driving back and forth to Naples to play with the orchestra a lot, and I've been listening to Revisionist History, the Malcolm Gladwell podcast. And I just thought, what if we actually started a podcast? It's almost MPA season. It's almost, all these band directors and all these orchestra directors are working on these things. They're all rehearsing constantly. We're rehearsing constantly. Like, what if we made a podcast and we'd started at least with rehearsal philosophy and technique, and that crosses all genres, not just percussion ensemble, but just talk about how we do it, and then we can figure out how other people might apply it. So anybody who's listening, maybe they can take one or two things and try it immediately and see if it works for them. And if not, they can always, do something else. So I'm really happy because obviously we're going to frame it with the way that we do things here and talk about how professional groups run as well, which is basically the way that we run. And then we can just kind of help people. I think that's going to be fun. So I'm happy you guys are here. I'm happy anybody's listening. If anybody's listening, I'm happy that you're here too.
Same.
Yeah.
So anyway, tell me this. I've been thinking a lot about it, and I believe that the key to the way that we run rehearsals at Florida State with the percussion ensemble comes down to 3 words, and we've been talking about this a lot before. It's about expectation, engagement, and efficiency. And I've asked you guys this before, but what's the first thing that happens culturally for this group before a rehearsal? Our rehearsal starts at 12:30. What happens at 11:30?
We're starting to set up, get instruments together. Right. We're rehearsing any small details that we need to before you get in here.
Yeah. Awesome. So everything's set up. It's ready to go.
The room
You're
is
already
ready.
playing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
everything's ready to go.
Yeah.
And then what happens about 5 minutes before downbeat at 12:30?
You come in,
Yeah.
you say
You're
hello
in.
to everybody, making small talk, just kind of like pointing out like any kind of like, what if we do this, move this here, or just like, hey, how's it going? Making eye contact with everybody.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. Like, I'll come in and I'll stand up front, and I know you guys know this, but maybe the people that are listening don't know this. We don't have a podium, but we have the area that I'll stand when I'm listening, or the area that I stand when I'm conducting. God help us all. But I won't actually stand in it until 12:30 exactly.
Right.
So before rehearsal, I'll come in and I'll cut up with you a little bit while y'all are still warming up, but I'm watching the clock the whole time. And then I start yelling out things like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. But in between, I make eye contact with every single person in the room, either to, give them a thumbs up or just say hi, or, talk about Sharky's style,
Yeah.
Whatever he's wearing to rehearsal in a day, and just kind of cut up. And, it's an approval thing. It's a tacit approval thing where I am actually letting you know that I acknowledge that you're in the room, that you're here on time, that you're prepared. And it's my way of thanking you right off the bat, but without saying anything, that I appreciate your being here. And then 12:30 comes.
Right.
And I'm looking at that clock, the digital clock. All of you are looking at it. I say 10 seconds. I move into position, and I sit there with my hands if I'm conducting, and I look up at it. 3, 2, 1, boom, and we go.
Yep.
Now, what psychologically are we trying to teach? Like, what are we trying to instill in people?
Preparedness.
Yeah.
Professionalism.
Being timely, and sort of like forward momentum heading in right into when we start, right? The acknowledgement, the letting everyone know that you see them, you recognize them, you know that they're there. Often, you're not just talking to us about fun stuff, which is also often what we're talking about, whether it's movies or pop culture references, but also about parts. You know, hey, when we get to this part, hey, when we get to that part, hey, what are you doing right there? Let's try a different symbol on that. You know, even before we start. So it's like the machine is winding up.
Yep. It's already business.
And then that 10-second moment, if you will, and it's, I mean, to anyone that is listening, it's not like a tense thing. It's almost like excitement. Like there's it's a little electric in the room, like right before we start. Like we just all, and that's, like you said, from the culture, that's built in. Like everyone knows that that's what's about to happen. And then right when we hit that, I mean, it's like a gun goes off and it's let's
like
go.
Horses, like horse races.
Yeah, and I think for me too, it's about respect for time.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we have this much time. You have put in all of this practice to be ready so that when we literally come in, the first rehearsal of the semester on the first piece, we play it all the way down. There's no like, hey, I didn't get all the way through it, or hey, we need to stop after 10 bars. It's just like a professional orchestra or a professional symphonic band or any of those things. Like, take an F, take an A on the stand. Mahler, please.
Here we go.
Go.
Yes.
You know, and you're expected to be able to get through it. And, you know, we can talk more about how do you address mistakes and how do you go back and hit things. And we'll talk about all that stuff later. But that's the expectation part. You know, you expect me to respect your time.
Yeah.
I expect you to respect the group's time as well as mine by being prepared, being on time, being early on time, and being ready to play and knowing your parts well enough that you're flexible and you're able to do things that I ask you to do without the programming failing you and you being unable to do whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know?
And you have to forgive me. Some of those things for me are a little hard to articulate sometimes because I've been part of the program for such a long time now that just feels normal to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in thinking back, it's really like you know that it's business time. You know, there's no, you get on the podium, okay, let's talk about what we're playing today. Let's start breaking down things that we're going to be looking for. That comes after, you know, in a much more fast-paced and exciting sort of atmosphere. But leading up to that moment of starting is like, it's like, for me, I just get really excited.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
You know, but
I do
in
too.
a very professional way that I feel like everywhere that I play now, like every time it's about time to go, it's like I feel that same sort of energy, and I think it started right here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing too. Like the engagement part, I think is important. Like, you know, we play all the time. There's almost no talking in rehearsals, and most of the talking that comes from me is over top of what we're doing.
Right.
Like, you know, next time do this as we continue. Or my hand saying this, or come on, or look up here, or do this, you know, whatever happens to be. But we're playing all the time.
Yeah.
So the playing to talking ratio is like probably upwards of 96, 97% playing and 2 to 3%, you know, of talking. And I don't know that everybody does that, you know. And personally for me, if I start at 12:30 and I start talking for like 5 minutes, then rehearsal hasn't actually started. Announcements have started.
Right.
And what that does over time is that starts to train you to believe that you don't need to be ready at 12:30. As long as you're ready by 12:35, then that's when music starts.
Right.
And if I did more stuff, and you know, and there are different levels of this. I mean, I think there are things that you could put in place right now for an ORF class or a middle school band rehearsal. I mean, these are things that you can do. Now, granted, you can't go in necessarily and expect that everybody on the first day of class in a middle school band is going to be able to play, you know, through whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have to talk about some stuff. But I think announcements, for me, especially when you start getting into college or you get into a really focused high school program or really any program, put those through the rehearsal.
Or
you
towards
know?
the back.
Yeah,
even.
or put them on the back.
Yeah.
you
Or
know?
just an email is fine.
Yeah,
Email
just
is so good.
Well, some of it, just on email is
Yeah.
fine. You know, but I do know that like sometimes
Right.
students need the reinforcement.
Absolutely.
And I totally understand that. But that's the whole thing. Like, I want to start playing. That's what we're supposed to be rehearsing, is our playing and our performance. And the teaching, I agree, comes along with it. But maybe you're doing 2 or 3 people. How about writing the announcements on the board? You know, we used to do that when, you know, for studio class. Like, so at the very, I would call it the PTI ticker. and I had all the words that would trigger what I had to say at the very end of class, and we would just go down it and make a big funny thing about it. But studio class starts 2:30 on Wednesday. Somebody's playing, somebody's doing something. So, and same thing with clinics. I mean, I think that that's true for anything. Like, just don't start talking or try to start with actual playing or whatever it happens to be. I feel like that's a better bookend for the experience than it. And it's also what you'll expect and what will happen when you get out of school.
Yeah.
And I think it helps you recognize when your time is being respected and when it's not. And also, it intrinsically motivates the players to respect what's happening. When you know that what the expectation is, and that, okay, they're going in there or we're going in here, and we're going to start on time, ready to go, we're playing right away, then they put that much more prepreration in.
Oh, yeah, because they know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And, and that's the expectation part, right? I mean, we've had the engagement. We've had, I forget what the other words were.
Engagement, expectation.
Efficiency? Let's go.
The efficiency of it.
The 3 E's.
I'm not being very efficient at the moment, but the efficiency of it, like we don't stop a lot.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. You probably have. But whenever talking that is more than about 10 seconds, I move off of the podium spot.
Right.
Like, if we do have to talk about something really quickly, but I don't want to do it on the podium, because psychologically what sets up for all of you is that if I'm standing there, it's business. Right. And I think just moving off of that, Don Owens, who was the guy who taught me this from Northwestern, he called it the sanctity of the podium. Like, if you're on the podium, music is being made.
Right.
Don't talk from it. And so I've always remembered that, and I've always felt like that was a really good thing, because it also disarms you a little bit, because if I walk over there to do it, you can just relax for a sec.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's time to get back to business.
Well, and what's nice about that, and then I want to be quiet for a little bit because I want to hear your thoughts.
I'm chilling.
But it took me a sec to get going. Sorry. When you're in a rehearsal and you're working and you're getting stuff done, right, there's an ebb and flow to the rehearsal, whether it's the parts, and there's parts that are more challenging or moments that are more challenging and moments that you can relax a little bit, right? But you have your on switch. And then whenever talking starts, that switch may stay on, but you might, theoretically or metaphorically put your hand on that switch. Like, you might turn it off in a sec if that talking continues longer than, like you said, 10 seconds. And when you step away, then we can kind of just turn the switch off for a sec. Not the switch, but you know what I'm saying? We can power it.
It's dimmable.
And you'll see us all kind of like, okay, for a sec. And then when we're back in, it's boom. But when you keep those moments few, it's actually easier to get stuff done. And I mean, I feel exhausted, especially when we're in here for the 2-hour block, but in a great way. I mean, it's addicting.
Yes.
Well, it's because you're playing constantly.
Right. But we're also mentally engaged constantly, but that's why we're able to get so much done, because that's what I'm trying to say. It's like that switch never goes fully powered down. And because then you got to start all the way over again when you do that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so I think that's a huge component of how we maintain efficiency in rehearsal.
I think we definitely are efficient. I was just thinking, if you're ever interested, if you're listening to this and you're wondering like what the talk to play ratio is for your rehearsal, set up a camera. Yeah. Go back and watch the rehearsal and have a stopwatch. And every time you stop and you start talking, hit it. And when music goes back, do the other. I mean, I've worked with conductors where that ratio was 5% playing and 95% talking.
Right.
Yeah.
And, nothing, it's like, I don't know. I don't want to be in those rehearsals.
Right.
I'm there to play. I'm there to play and get better. And, that's what I think it's supposed to be for. And, often, I mean, I can't remember the last time that we actually went over.
Rarely. Yeah, no.
Like, we never go over.
We
Usually
always
I'm
get done
asking
what we need to.
Can we do one more?
Just one more.
Come on, let's stay late. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But no.
And you won't let it happen.
No,
But
because
that's
that's overtime in the real world.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And if you can't plan, I mean, and it's wild. Like, you'll see out there when you're out of school, and it comes up on whatever time the morning rehearsal or afternoon rehearsal is over. When it gets up to 4:00, like personnel manager, that's it. Put down the baton. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if it's in the middle of a phrase or in the middle of a solo. It just doesn't matter. That's the end.
Yeah.
And so I try and gauge it
Yeah.
so that we'll be able to do those things.
Something that, two things. One with the talking, like how you said that you talk over, like while we're playing to try and like minimize the talking. I've noticed that over my time, that a lot of like band directors, orchestra directors and stuff will stop and talk and like say the same thing over and over again, almost for like a validation standpoint. It's interesting. You know what I mean? It's like they're talking and it's like they want that feedback from you, and they're going to keep doing it until they get. If it's not working, what you're saying, move on, and you'll come back to it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's some things that you are not going to fix in the moment.
Right,
yeah.
Right,
so
exactly.
Let's come back to that later, or let's come back to that next time, or after rehearsal, come see me. We'll talk about a strategy, and then you can take care of it when everyone else's time isn't, disrespected by you sitting there for 20 minutes while we figure out some kind of thing, and then it's story time.
And I feel like with our rehearsals specifically, you don't look for that validation ever. You just tell them you tell us what you're hearing and what you would want to hear. And sometimes if you're like, I just want a different sound, we figure that out later in other rehearsals or our own practice sessions. So we don't waste time in rehearsal. And I think that that's really interesting and something that I didn't realize until like I went out in the real world. I was like, this guy's talking a lot. Not you, but like other directors or like orchestra directors and stuff. I was like, he said the same thing 4 different times. Well, you know what I mean?
And, educationally, I can get behind, having multiple ways to express something to students, And I also recognize that, there are different levels of your implementation for these things. There's some things that you can't let pass.
Right.
There's some things that you can let pass but get them next time. And then there's some things that you can stop and fix and move.
Yes.
And that's fine. And then also, so much of what we do is, okay, we're really going to dig into a certain concept, maybe in a certain part of the rehearsal, like timekeeping or feeling time or something where we're just constantly experiment. Now try this, try this, try this, try this, try this. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Now apply that to the rest of the piece. And when I hear you next week, have it there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think all of that stuff is really important. Like this episode? Let us know your thoughts. The Again But Better team includes Associate Producer Darcy Wright, Project Coordinator Austin Palella, editing and production by Tallahassee Photo and Video, also known as the amazing Justin Ball, and I'm your host, John Parks. See you next time for another episode of Again But Better.